In the last 3 election cycles in Nigeria, sharing rice and cash was the single most reliable way to guarantee voter loyalty. Political parties spent billions on it, godfathers swore by it, and it worked every single time. So here's the question nobody is asking right now. What happens when Nigerians stop collecting it? Not just refusing it out of conscience, but actively rejecting it, filming it, reporting it, and in some communities, returning it to the sender. Something has shifted in the electorate. And if you understand what has shifted and why, you'll know exactly what 2027 looks like before the campaign season even opens. Stay with me, because this one changes everything. Before we go any deeper, if you're just finding Naijanewsfeed, welcome. I built this channel for one reason, to break down what's really happening in Nigerian politics without the noise and without the spin. Every video I put out, I put real work into. And the only way I can keep doing that, keep going deeper, keep bringing you better analysis, is if you subscribe. Hit that button right now. It costs you nothing. It means everything to this channel. Let's get into it. For decades, vote buying in Nigeria operated like an open secret with an unofficial price list. In 2019, monitoring groups documented cash handouts ranging from 500 naira to 5,000 naira per voter in competitive constituencies. In 2023, that figure reportedly jumped, with some accounts from Osun, Ekiti, and parts of Lagos suggesting bags of rice, cooking oil, and cash bundles of 10,000 naira or more being distributed in the days leading up to polling. The logic was simple. Hunger is immediate, governance is abstract. If you're struggling to eat, 3,000 naira today beats a promise about the economy in 4 years. So, what triggered the change? 3 things converged and they hit at the same time. First, the naira devaluation and removal of fuel subsidy in 2023 made the cost of living collapse so fast that 10,000 naira suddenly felt like an insult rather than an incentive. When a bag of rice now costs what used to buy 3 bags, election rice is no longer a gesture, it's mockery. Second, a new generation of civic mobilization, driven heavily by social media and post-EndSARS networks, has reframed vote buying not as a transaction but as an act of self-harm. Collect the money, vote your conscience became don't collect it at all, because accepting it normalizes it. Third, INEC's increased focus on election monitoring combined with civil society groups and international observers documenting inducement in real time has raised the social cost of being seen collecting. The trigger event? A viral moment in early 2024 and in subsequent off-cycle governorship elections where communities were filmed publicly rejecting or returning bags of rice that had been delivered to their street. That footage traveled. It gave people a framework. This is what refusal looks like, and it's possible. Let's be clear about what the law actually says, because this matters for understanding where the power lies. Section 124 of the Electoral Act 2022 explicitly criminalizes vote buying. It prohibits offering, giving, or receiving money, gifts, or any other benefit to induce a person to vote or refrain from voting for a particular candidate. The penalty on conviction, a fine and up to 2 years imprisonment. That's the law on paper. The problem, and where the gray area lives, is enforcement. INEC has the mandate to regulate the electoral process, but prosecuting vote buying falls under the police and the judiciary. And here is where deliberate ambiguity is being exploited. The line between campaign gift and inducement is contested in Nigerian courts. Distributing items without explicitly demanding a vote for a named candidate has been used as a loophole. Parties call it empowerment, not vote buying. The ICPC and EFCC technically have jurisdiction over corruption in elections, but operationally, their presence on election day has been inconsistent. Civil society organizations like Yaga Africa run the Women's Situation Room and the parallel vote tabulation process, and they've been among the most effective at documenting inducements. But documentation alone doesn't prosecute anyone. Here's the structural truth. The institutions exist, the law exists, but the political will to enforce them has always been selective. When the same parties that control government are the ones buying votes, the watchdog is owned by the same people it's supposed to watch.
This is where we go deep. The assumption behind vote buying has always been transactional, that the Nigerian electorate is fundamentally desperate and therefore purchasable. For a long time, that assumption was partly correct, not because Nigerians lack civic sense, but because the material conditions of poverty made short-term exchange rational. But here's what the political strategists inside Aso Rock are now grappling with: the transaction no longer closes. Inflation under this administration has been among the steepest in recent history. When the costs of living become extreme enough, the relationship between the voter and the patron changes. Instead of creating loyalty, the handout creates resentment. They are giving us rice with the same hands that took away our livelihood. That is now a common sentiment across market women, transport workers, and the urban poor, who used to be the most accessible voting bloc for ruling party machinery. Who benefits from this shift? Opposition parties, primarily the Labour Party and the PDP, stand to gain if they can position themselves credibly as the alternative. Peter Obi's 2023 performance, particularly his strength in urban centers, already suggested that a significant portion of the electorate, especially younger voters, had decoupled from the transactional model. But here's the nuance. Decoupling from vote buying doesn't automatically translate into organized opposition votes. It could produce mass abstention, spoiled ballots, or genuine third-party choices. The political landscape in 2027 is not simply APC versus the field. It's a question of whether anyone can channel this disillusionment into a coherent electoral force. Who stands to lose? The APC's ground-level political machinery is built on the ward system, a network of local coordinators, party agents, and what are called mobilizers, who essentially manage vote-buying logistics. That infrastructure is expensive. If the returns are diminishing, if money spent on rice and cash no longer guarantees delivered votes, the entire funding logic collapses. This also affects godfathers at the state level. Men like certain power brokers in the Southwest, the Northwest, and the Delta, who have maintained influence precisely because they could deliver blocks of votes in exchange for contracts and appointments. If the blocks no longer respond to cash, the godfather's value proposition disappears. The regional dimension. The rejection of vote buying is not uniform across Nigeria. It's most pronounced in the southwest urban corridors, parts of the southeast where the Labour Party built significant youth organization in 2023, and increasingly in north-central cities like Abuja and Jos. It is weakest and traditional patronage politics remain strongest in areas where the local economy is most dependent on government as the primary employer and where civic society networks are thinnest. This matters because Nigerian presidential elections are ultimately about electoral college math across states. A shift in Lagos and a few southwest states, combined with sustained Labour Party organization in the southeast, could fundamentally alter the calculus, even without majority national rejection of vote buying. The silent players. Watch three categories of actors who are not making noise but are very much active. 1. Diaspora-funded civil society. Nigerian professionals abroad, particularly those who came of age during End SARS, have been quietly funding voter education and documentation infrastructure. They don't appear on ballot papers, but they finance the ecosystem that makes refusal organized rather than random. 2. Traditional rulers. In many communities, the Oba, Emir, or chief still carries enormous influence over local voting behavior. Some traditional institutions have begun publicly discouraging vote acceptance. When a community elder says, "Don't collect," it carries more weight than any campaign poster. This is a realignment that the APC has not fully reckoned with. 3. Business elites hedging. Some significant private sector actors who funded the 2023 APC campaign are quietly making contact with opposition figures, not defection, hedging. They see 2027 as genuinely uncertain and are spreading their political investments. That money moving signals something. Timeline of moves so far. 2023, APC wins presidency despite historically strong urban opposition performance. Electoral petition dismissed. Opposition demoralized. Late 2023, fuel subsidy removal triggers cost of living crisis. Government approval ratings drop sharply. Early 2025, protests over economic hardship, food prices, electricity tariffs begin to echo end SARS in tone, though not yet in scale. Mid-2025 to now, civic groups actively campaign on electoral integrity ahead of 2027 registration. Social media saturated with voter education content specifically targeting vote-buying rejection. If what I just laid out surprises you, if you didn't know the ground was shifting this much, drop a comment below. Tell me, do you think this is a real movement, or are people going to collect the rice come 2027 and vote APC anyway? I genuinely want your take before we get to the part of this analysis that changes the whole picture. And real talk, if this is the kind of breakdown you can't get on regular news channels, do me a favor and subscribe to Nigerianewsfeed. I don't have a corporate sponsor telling me what I can and can't say. The only thing keeping this channel going is you, your subscription, your share, your comment. It's free, it takes 2 seconds, and it's honestly the most direct way to tell me, keep going, keep digging. I see every subscription. Thank you. Zoom out. If this trend solidifies, if vote buying genuinely loses its effectiveness as a political tool, what does that mean for Nigeria as a whole? For the balance of power, federal incumbency becomes less dominant. Right now, one of the biggest advantages of controlling the federal government is controlling the resources used to mobilize voters, contracts, appointments, cash. If the cash component loses its conversion rate, the resource advantage weakens. State-level opposition governments, currently held by PDP in significant states, gain relative power because they no longer need to outspend the federal machine to compete. For the economy, counterintuitively, the economic crisis that is driving the rejection of vote buying is also the crisis that has made governance most volatile. Foreign investors watch political stability closely. An election cycle that shifts towards issue-based voting could, in theory, produce more accountability-driven governance, which is better for long-term investment. But a highly contested election with unclear legitimacy, that's a risk premium on Nigeria's economic credibility. For inter-ethnic and interfaith relations, vote buying has historically been a mechanism for managing ethnic brokerage. Deliver your community, we deliver resources to you. If that system breaks down, the political coalitions held together by it could fracture along more naked ethnic and religious lines. This is not inevitable, but it is a risk. Disillusionment without a new integrating political narrative can push identity politics to the surface. Security implications. Past elections in Nigeria have seen violence linked to the frustration of vote-buying networks. When money is deployed and the expected votes don't materialize, political violence often follows. A more civically engaged electorate that rejects handouts but doesn't yet have institutional trust creates a new kind of tension. Watch for increased intimidation tactics replacing cash in communities where the old model is breaking down. This section applies because there is a genuine international dimension. Don't skip it. Western governments, particularly the US State Department, the UK Foreign Office, and the EU Electoral Observation Mission, have all placed Nigeria's democratic trajectory on their watch lists since the contentious 2023 elections. The petitions, the allegations of manipulation, and the conduct of INEC put Nigeria on the diplomatic radar. For Nigerians in the diaspora, understand that this matters beyond symbolism. US and UK visa policies for Nigerian officials, World Bank and IMF engagement with the Nigerian government, and whether Western governments treat the 2027 election result as legitimate, all of these are live questions. A deeply contested 2027 election could trigger the kind of targeted sanctions and diplomatic pressure that would have real economic consequences.
There's also a global pattern here. Across West Africa, Senegal, Ghana, even within the Sahel crisis, there is a broad renegotiation between citizens and governments over the social contract. Nigeria is not unique, but Nigeria is the region's largest country. How this plays out here sets a template. The international community is not going to determine the outcome of a Nigerian election, but they can shape the consequences of it, and that matters for everyone from traders at Alaba Market to tech entrepreneurs in Yaba.
Let's be honest about what people are getting wrong on both sides of this debate. Misconception 1. This is just Twitter talk. On election day, everyone collects. The evidence does not entirely support this. INEC and civil society data from 2023 and subsequent elections showed meaningful urban voter resistance and historically low rural turnout in areas where civic engagement was lowest, not mass compliance. The issue is not whether some people collect, they always will. The issue is whether the marginal voter who used to be purchasable has changed. The data suggests they have in certain segments. That is what shifts election outcomes. Misconception 2. Tinubu is finished in 2027. The strongest counter-argument from the other side. Incumbency in Nigeria is enormously powerful. Control of INEC appointments, state security apparatus, and federal patronage networks is not nothing. The history of Nigerian elections, including 2023, shows that structural advantages matter as much as popular sentiment. Simply because rice is being rejected in some communities does not mean the machinery of incumbency is broken. Where this counter-argument falls apart, it assumes the machinery can operate on a collapsing economic foundation. It can't indefinitely. When the people distributing the rice start asking who is going to feed them, the machine begins to eat itself. Misconception 3. Labour Party will automatically benefit. Not necessarily. Peter Obi's 2023 momentum relied heavily on novelty, the obedient movement's energy, and urban youth mobilization. That energy is perishable. If Labour Party doesn't build durable ward-level organization before 2027, the sentiment that drove Obi's numbers in 2023 could scatter, some to the PDP, some to abstention, some to yet another new face. Sentiment without structure doesn't win Nigerian elections. What is actually true is the electorate is more volatile and less predictable than it has been in any cycle since 1999. That volatility is the real story, and volatile electorates punish complacency more than anything else. Here's what to watch. If you follow these signals, you'll know where this is going before the pundits do. Most likely next moves. The ACP will attempt a two-track strategy. On one hand, a policy-based rebranding ahead of 2027, infrastructure announcements, subsidy palliatives, targeted welfare schemes to address the material crisis driving rejection of vote buying. On the other, a crackdown on opposition civic infrastructure. Watch for pressure on NGOs, arrests of legal challenges to voter registration drives, and manipulation of INEC leadership appointments. Opposition parties will attempt to consolidate. Expect significant merger conversations, some public, some backroom, between Labour Party and PDP structures at the state level. The question is whether egos and financial interests let this happen. Signals that things are escalating. Watch INEC's independence, specifically who is appointed to replace commissioners and resident electoral commissioners ahead of 2027. Any indication of executive influence over those appointments is a red flag. Watch whether civil society is allowed to operate freely. Restrictions on voter education programs, arrests of election observers, or harassment of media covering vote-buying documentation would signal that the incumbent is aware the old model is failing and is moving to contain the information environment rather than fix the underlying problem. Watch the governorship elections between now and 2027. They are dress rehearsals.
Turnout, voting patterns, and how effectively cash is or isn't mobilizing voters in those contests will tell you everything about the presidential race. Best case scenario, a competitive 2027 election where issue-based campaigning plays a meaningful role. INEC operates with credibility, and the result, whoever wins, is accepted. Nigeria demonstrates that democratic maturation is possible even under economic pressure. Worst-case scenario, a heavily contested election, widespread allegations of manipulation, a disputed result, and the kind of institutional crisis that produces either political paralysis or renewed pressure on democratic norms, with external actors choosing sides in ways that deepen the conflict rather than resolve it. Long-term impact if nothing changes. A generation that already distrusts institutions loses what little faith remains. The combination of economic hardship, political cynicism, and weak civic institutions creates fertile ground for authoritarian solutions, the kind of strong-man narrative that always sounds appealing when democratic processes have failed people repeatedly. That is what is actually at stake in 2027. Not just who wins, but whether Nigerians believe the system is worth engaging with at all. We opened with a question. What happens when Nigerians stop collecting election rice? Here's the honest answer. It is not a simple win for democracy. It is a volatile, complicated, and genuinely uncertain transition. The rejection of vote buying is real in certain communities and among certain demographics. It is not yet a nationwide uniform movement, but it is a directional signal. And in politics, direction matters more than destination. What we know is the old formula is breaking. What we don't know is what replaces it. What Nigerians decide to do with their disillusionment, whether they channel it into organized political action, whether they abstain in frustration, or whether they are captured by the next wave of cash that arrives in a different packaging, that is the question that will determine 2027. The rice is being rejected. Whether that becomes a revolution or just a moment is entirely up to what happens next. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think this rejection of vote buying is real, or do you think 2027 will play out the same way it always has? Drop your take in the comments. If this breakdown gave you genuine clarity on what's building under the surface of Nigerian politics, do me a real favor. Share this video with one person who needs to understand this. Not for the algorithm, because Nigeria needs more informed citizens, and that starts in our own circles. Like the video and subscribe to Nigerianewsfeed, because this channel exists purely because of people who believe that good analysis matters. I don't do this for sponsors. I do it because Nigeria deserves better political conversation. Every subscriber tells me, keep going. So if you're not subscribed yet, do it now. I'll see you in the next one. Stay sharp.